So how much processed food do you eat? And if you're looking in a supermarket, the majority of the percentages of food being in a supermarket is processed. So it holds on the entire range of what we eat. So if we could change that, our health would be much, much better. Our weight would be better controlled. Our guts would be better. It might be that our mental capacity would be even better.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 27 of the Polling Principle. And I'm here with Professor Andrea Maier. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. We've had a few other folks from the longevity kind of field, Matt Caberlin and a few other folks that I'm sure you know. And I'm actually very, very happy to have you here as well. So thank you for taking the time. To begin with, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. Maybe a little bit about what got you interested in longevity or geriatric medicine, and what was your journey towards where you are today.
The summary is that I am loving the body and I like to maintain it. I like histology, so I like to get biopsies from different parts of our bodies and to just understand where the beauty is coming from. And I studied medicine. I became an internal medicine specialist and in the end, a geriatrician. I loved the biology and I always thought we need to improve the healthcare system. And I did that first in geriatrics, really trying to bring innovation into that system. And I discovered very early in my career that we might want to optimize health of aging individuals much, much earlier and not waiting until you are 70 and 80 and you already have a couple of diseases and you're taking so many medication already. So how can we make sure that we are maintaining the beauty of the body? And that is actually the theme across my entire career.
Thank you. Maybe it's tying a little bit on that. I think maybe a lot of folks think that longevity medicine is, always going to be some kind of silver bullet. Somebody that is 70 years old, does some, plasma transfusion, and then suddenly they can live, healthily again for another, X number of years. What are maybe some of the most common misconceptions about what longevity medicine is and the kinds of things that we can do today versus we may be able to do in the future, but are still not possible today?
So first, it's defining what we are talking about. So healthy longevity medicine is a new discipline which is not yet recognized by many medical societies. So it's very, very, very young. And healthy longevity medicine is optimizing health and health span while antagonizing the aging processes across the lifespan. So that's the definition. And very often we are not only talking about healthy longevity medicine, but also precision geromedicine. Why do we have two different terms? We have that because healthy longevity medicine is being used as the term being publicly available, being publicly used. Healthy longevity is not even defined. The medicine of it is defined. That's the reason why getting lots of critique because nobody knew what healthy longevity medicine is. Everybody uses the term longevity medicine. It's not really certified. It's not being regulated. That we coined the new term precision geromedicine. Everybody knows what precision medicine is. It's the hottest item in medicine to make it more precise, to make it dependent what your need as a patient is. And gero means either if you are sticking to the old Latin and old Greek, it's old or it's vitality. So we really coined the word precision vitality medicine, precision geromedicine, and bringing that into clinical practice, which also means that the definition of healthy longevity medicine still holds. So also precision geromedicine is optimizing health and health span while antagonizing aging processes across the lifespan. So what we really want to achieve is not only measuring how old somebody is biologically, but then making somebody younger. So optimizing the aging process across the lifespan. And across the lifespan also means that everybody is included in principle. Of course, the ones who want to be included. Is that the same as the plasma transfusions, as the peptide festivals, and all other noise? No, absolutely not. Precision geomedicine is based on evidence-based medicine, and evidence-based medicine is well defined to investigate, to test if it not only works in animals, but in humans, and to really bring it into randomized controlled trials to actually showcase that certain interventions work. And many of the interventions which are out there, especially on TikTok and YouTube, and very often even in LinkedIn, they are not yet proven. I do not say that they do not work because nobody tested it. So I would never say that, but the evidence is not there. Hence, in my view, and in many views, this is not evidence-based medicine. Hence, it should not be in the medical system.
What part of precision geomedicine is lifestyle versus, say, other more sophisticated interventions, right? Like if you had to maybe give it a percentage, what part of it would be, good, diet and nutrition, healthy sleep and healthy habits, right? Versus, other, other treatments that may require a prescription or a doctor or a lab.
Mm-hmm. So I think I struggled in your introduction around the world's sophisticated. Very often we don't take diet and sleep and exercise seriously. And I think we should take it seriously because it's magnificent in terms of potential effects. And that's so important. Very often we think about lifestyle interventions and we think, okay, you should eat healthier, you should move more, and you sleep better. That's too generalized. This is public health, and this is a very, very important public health message. And everybody should adhere to it. So the adherence is a problem. But what precision geomedicine is doing is taking these ingredients, what you have in, for example, physical activity prescription or in sleep prescription, make it precise to your needs. How much zone 3 or zone 4 or zone 2 do you need? How is your REM sleep compared to the deep sleep you have? How can you actually interfere with the biology of aging while using these so important and most magnificent lifestyle interventions to make it more precise? And there was also to get a better, even more better effect for that individual. How much balance should you do and compare to strength, compare to endurance? What kind of food should you actually eat? Is it based on your genome? Is it based on your microbiome? Now we have the capacity, and that's what I'm doing in clinical practice, to measure lots of biological pathways. We can measure your genetic contribution to longevity. We are measuring the microbiome. We can measure minerals and vitamins in the blood, and there with fine-tune dietary prescriptions. And then it becomes really part of medicine. It's not just that you are eating out and you are eating, you think, okay, it's healthy, but what is your body needing? What kind of fuel is your body needing at what time?
Got it. Yeah. So if I could maybe rephrase the question, the intervention may not require a lot of complicated technology, but the diagnosis and then finding out, how that intervention needs to be applied, that may be very, very sophisticated, right? Like you may do, whole genome sequencing and then identify specific, mutations in an individual that may affect, the diet, for example, or the exercise that is most effective for that individual. So that, maybe the diet and the exercise is lifestyle, so to speak, right? But how to find the ideal one for the person, that is very sophisticated, so to say.
Yeah. Well, that you are right. So in the end, it's how to then apply certain interventions, but also there you need technology. How do you know when you are in zone 3 or zone 5? There you need technology. And I think making lifestyle sexy is most important. Make it attractive, make it measurable, and not just a couple of minutes in zone 5, but also think about using different technologies, measuring the glucose levels, measuring lactate during the exercises. Then it becomes most precise, and you need huge technological improvements to really being able to not just diagnose, but also to intervene with that precision. And of course, putting a treadmill into a room, putting somebody on and taking glucose and lactate measurements, that's quite easy in the end. And of course, it requires less technology than plasmapheresis, for example, but it doesn't mean that the effect is less.
Maybe as a little bit of an aside, I just realized myself that I recently did a whole genome sequencing. I realized I have certain mutations that make my histamine clearance pathways a little bit different than other people, right? So some foods that are higher in histamine actually affect me more than other folks. And like, of course, like 20 years ago, it would have been completely impossible, right, to do this without a very extensive, trial and error. And I was like, well, yeah, now kind of, things, match easily, right? Because I have that data.
Yeah. And now you are smiling and you are getting excited. And that's what we actually have to transfer to other people, because knowing yourself and know how an environment and food is interacting with your body, and there was maybe with mood swings you have, or you don't feel so well. And it can just be tiny differences, and you're changing something based on the information. And you're, I wouldn't say a different person, but it's measurable and you feel it. And that's the greatness I think we are in currently, that as a physician, I now have the tools to do it. And I see these tiny changes can have such an effect. And histamine is one thing, but just think about vitamin D metabolism, or think about a silly thing that's drinking coffee. Are you metabolizer of coffee, and is it fast or is it slow? And then you will know if you should actually have the double espresso as I have in the evening. I love it. I can sleep because I metabolize. Yes, yes,
Yeah, I
you
cannot
can.
drink coffee after like noon. It's kind of like the limit for me.
Yeah, and then the question is, should you actually just then adapt your lifestyle? Of course, because you know that you are a slow metabolizer. But now we can also measure that, which is great. And it's just one very simple example of how impactful it could be. And of course, don't measure your genome if you just want to know if you can have coffee in the night or in the afternoon.
But I mean, I think the nice thing is that a lot of this stuff have become so cheap that, back in the day it would cost thousands of dollars. Nobody could really justify, just for the sake of knowing when you can stop drinking coffee, right? But now it's like, well, for $200, $300 or whatnot, right? Like you can know so many interesting things about yourself, right? So I think it opens up door for a lot of people to start doing the same testing.
Yeah. So the most important thing is, if I may, for people who are really interested in their health, is investing in their genome, because you only have to measure it once. However, there's always an however in health longevity medicine at the moment. However, you need somebody to interpret the data well, to also see, okay, what kind of consequences does that have? What kind of, not bad consequences, but maybe positive consequences? What kind of interventions? What do you do with the data? And that's an issue around the globe in the field. What do you do with all the digital devices you have around your finger and your wrist, and your glucose monitoring system, your whole by genome scan, and then you analyze your microbiome? What do you do with the data and making sense out of it? Because very often it's even contradictory what's coming out of it. So most importantly is, how do you analyze it? And there, healthy longevity medicine and physicians and precision germ medicine kick in.
I'd love to delve a little bit deeper into the microbiome. I have personally a feeling that it's one of those things that most people would ignore, but it has, of course, a tremendous effect on I think it's been shown to be correlated with depression and all sorts of different diseases, for example, right? So, um, what are maybe some of the interesting insights that somebody can get from understanding their microbiome composition?
So, so first of all, the microbiome is a very nice system, very often not being diagnosed. So, in your gut, you have roughly 2 to 3 kilogram of microbes. So, if you want to lose weight quickly, don't ruin your microbiome and get rid of them. It's 2 to 3 kilogram. It's not only bacteria, but it's also viruses, it's fungi. So it's a very nice interplay of different species within inside you. And you could say, this is not looking nice, like me and having fungi and viruses inside, but you need them because they should be your friend. And very often, it's not really appreciated. What does it mean to be your friend? They can make vitamins. They are building the structure to absorb things. They can even produce a little bit of NAD precursors. They bring the energy into you. So it's a wonderful system. Um, Measuring the microbiome is a little bit difficult. What do you actually measure? Because in every tract in your gut, you have different species because they need to do different things. So, but nevertheless, we are now able in clinical practice, but also in research, to measure the microbiome. We are identifying who is there, what is the diversity, how many different friends do you have, what is the volume of the magnitude of certain species, how much lactobacillus do you have, how much butyrate producers do you have. So it's not only who is there, but also what is the function, and are they actually enabled to functioning well, to help you with regards to your mood, with regards to brain health, with regards to in metabolic health. So, and then most importantly, which is so nice, and we discovered it in the past 5 to 10 years, you can influence the microbiome quite easily. Within weeks, you can change your microbiome, even if you are doing if you are traveling and you are traveling into a different region, you're eating different, your microbiome will change. That also brings me to the point that if you are measuring the microbiome, you need to understand and ask, when was the sample taken? How was the sample taken? What was the surrounding to interpret the data better? And that's very often lacking with consumer goods, for example.
Yep. Is that an ideal composition, or at least an ideal composition for a person?
Um, I would say no, or we don't know what the ideal composition is, and most importantly, it should be ideal to you. But what we know, what's not good. So if you have loss of Clostridium, for example, that's not good. If your diversity is very low, below 50%, not good. So diversity should be high, and you should have the functional bacteria, viruses, and fungi. So we know how to optimize it individually, but when it is really optimal, I think we don't know yet. But you can absolutely identify a gut microbiome which is not good and then improving it. And these individuals, and I see that very often in clinical practice at Chi Longevity, is people might have zero symptoms and they feel okay and they would never think about their gut. And then you are measuring the microbes in the gut, and then you see low diversity, no functional species. You said, okay, let's focus on it, and people feel better afterwards.
Yeah, I imagine like having a low quality diet or a standard Western diet, whatever that means, are not good things, for increasing diversity in your gut. What other kinds of interventions, would make sense for somebody, beyond, I guess, improving their diet or like selecting different foods depending on what kind of composition they need?
Yeah. So the first reaction while getting a microbiome sample back is not going to the prebiotics or probiotics, or so either giving certain strains or giving fibers. So which means taking a supplement that's not in principle needed. Lots can be done with diet, and just think about fermented foods. So I would love to ask every listener, think about how much fermented food did you actually eat last week? And very often it's nearly zero. And because there's still a sort of stigma. And secondly, very often because it disappeared out of our diet, it's also quite expensive sometimes because it's novel. It's like hip to be eat now, to be to eat fermented food. So, but if you're looking at the origin of our diet, in the absence of a fridge, very often we fermented actually food to make it more sustainable because we had no fridge, we had no electricity. So fermentation is a very important thing. If you then want to drink your kombucha, etc., it's up to you. But fermentation is most important, and then the second thing is getting the fibers in. So the fiber content should be adequate because fiber is nothing else than bricks for bacteria and viruses to build their homes, because they need to build colonies and they have to stick to something, and very often these are the fibers.
Yeah. I remember reading a stat at some point a few years ago that I don't know exactly what was the number, but like 70, 80, 90% is really, really high percentage of the population as a whole do not eat enough fiber. Like it's
Yeah.
something that is so bad that is chronic. Basically, you would assume that somebody is just not eating enough fiber.
Yes, but the same holds for protein intake very often, or the protein intake is massively just through red meat. But the same percentages holds for many dietary advice and guidelines. So how much processed food do you eat? And if you're looking in a supermarket, the majority of the percentages of food being in a supermarket is processed. So it holds on the entire range of what we eat. So if we could change that, our health would be much, much better. Our weight would be better controlled. Our guts would be better. It might be that our mental capacity would be even better.
Mhm. Yeah. I've never experienced this myself, but I definitely have heard from people that would have very poor diets, drinking, Coca-Cola all day and eating, chicken sandwiches or whatever. And then they talk about like having a brain fog, right? And then suddenly they change their diet, they start eating, like healthy, maybe, broccoli, right? Or like, a more whole foods, whole plant-based, kind of diet, right? And then they mentally feel better, which when you think about it, of course, it makes a lot of sense, right? Like, how is your brain going to function, right? But I guess a lot of people just don't make that connection between what you put inside of your body and, the capacity of your brain.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely a no-brainer. So, how can you stay alive? You can only stay alive if you have energy in your body, and you give food to your body, and the quality absolutely matters.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about exercise and diet and sleep. What other things are maybe um underrated, right? Like, maybe like people should be, also paying attention, right? Like, we haven't mentioned anything about supplements. We haven't mentioned anything about, maybe, other potential, interventions. Like, what kinds of things, would be good to, keep in the back of our minds, right?
Before talking about interventions, I always urge people to first see what would you actually need. And once again, there are public health guidelines which everybody should adhere to, and that's the basis. But on the other hand, get to know yourself, what you actually need. What do you do? What is your fear to max at the moment to see, Do you need to train a little bit more endurance? Why is your VO2 max low? Is it because you are not jumping and you are not running and you're not escaping the tiger? Or is there a problem with your mitochondria? And do you need some supplements, for example? So first, before we jump into interventions, we have to analyze what the problem is. I will give you an example. 60% of the Singapore population is taking supplements regularly. Very often, these are multivitamins and minerals. The question is, do you need it? So very often we say, okay, take a supplement, will not do bad stuff. But the question is, do you need it? So talking first about what is the diet, how do you absorb the diet, how is it interfering with your microbiome, will give you in the end the answer if you need a multivitamin or mineral supplement. And now we have so many studies with regards to multivitamin and mineral supplementation that we know only the ones who have a poor diet, very often because of illnesses or because of a trauma. So think about a hip fracture or undergoing chemotherapy. Very often, these kind of conditions are aligned with not eating well and not getting the vitamins, the minerals. And then supplementation absolutely makes sense. There's only limited evidence at the moment that, for example, people with mild cognitive impairment or risk factors for cognitive impairment, they might actually benefit from a multivitamin and mineral. Is this because they're already low, or it is because certain vitamins and minerals are interfering with the process of cognitive decline? We have to answer. But knowing what you take is so important. So therewith, next to the public health guidelines, we cannot recommend if you should take uracil A or a fisetin or a spermidin, or you should take alpha ketoglutarate. It depends on what your need is. That's also the reason why I very often say we have to disentangle now the wellness sector from the medicine sector, because in healthy longevity medicine and precision share medicine, we can now measure so many things and we can make sure that the intervention is based on the characteristics of an individual.
Yeah, I think there is, maybe a little bit of an underlying assumption that if you take vitamin C, for example, right? If your body doesn't need it, well, then that's fine, but it's cheap and it won't do any harm. So why not just take it, right? And then you keep adding more and more supplements. And then if you can, just spend a little bit of money and then solve that problem, that seems like, I think in the minds of a lot of people, it's a good idea. But it seems like, a lot of it may be just wasted or maybe even counterproducent.
I would say, think about the start of the conversation, the beauty of the body. Why would you expose your body to something your body is not needing with the thought you're just peeing it out, or your liver is just making sure to release it again? That's a little bit silly, I think. Because why would you expose something you are wasting anyway because you are not using it? So here really precision comes in. What do you need when? Why would you spoil, first of all, the vitamins, the minerals, the supplements? Why would you expose your body? Because your body has to deal with it. Once you are taking it, your microbes will make use of it. And you're exposing your organs with these molecules, and these molecules can be very powerful. And I would not advise to do that.
Yeah. That is, I think, most people, have probably tried, certain kinds of supplements at one point or another, right? And there's, of course, I guess, biohackers, that would just try everything under the sun and see what happens. Uh, I can imagine from what we have been talking to so far that you're not a big fan of folks, experimenting on themselves, just to see, what works and what doesn't.
I love biohackers. There's nothing wrong with biohackers. Like I love them. I have many in my clinical practice. Absolutely. I love them because they're so curious about the body. What I don't love is biohackers who are very vocal on social media and say, because it works in me, you should all follow me now and take it. And very often then it becomes not even a personal incentive, but it becomes a financial incentive. And that's what I do not like. Because biohacking means that you are experimenting. Do you feel better? And I think it's the essence of past medicine, at least, before we had randomized control trials. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had so much knowledge with regards to how our body functions, because people are experimenting with it. It's great. But don't then bring the message to a huge amount of people who are not having the knowledge of what biohacking is, what the consequences of certain interventions are, and then selling it and making money out of it.
Mhm. Yep. I
So,
think.
but in clinical practice, um, especially biohackers, well, the biohackers has a negative connotation, I think. So, but it should be positive. But very often they are coming and wanting advice to actually reduce the number of interventions they have, because the certain time you're accumulating the interventions, and then how to stop, or can you stop, and what is the interaction? And very importantly, there is only limited evidence, nearly zero, that if you are taking one supplement or one intervention, you're adding another, that you have additional value and you're getting additional value out of it. Because it can be antagonistic. It can be actually harming sort of the other intervention and being counterproductive. So most importantly is know what you actually do. Think about what the interaction of it is. And if you want advice, go to your precision medicine physician to see, okay, what can you actually stop, to see if you're still feeling well, looking at markers, quantifying it, and then maybe restarting. But very often in my clinical practice, it's deep prescribing. And that's what I learned from geriatrics. Look, in geriatrics, very often people are coming with 20 medications. What is needed, when, why, and in what dosage? And that's the knowledge we are transferring now to precision geromedicine.
Yeah. And I guess also some of the supplements may only help to compensate for something that is deficient, but if the baseline is already normal, they don't have any effect whatsoever, right?
Here we have to disentangle what is normal and what is optimal. So I'm not interested in what's normal. Normal and abnormal is conventional medicine. So very often we say, if you are normal, you are good enough. And it's fine. However, what we discovered is that within the normal ranges, there are optimal ranges. And higher is not always better, or lower is not always better, but there might be within the normal range, sort of U shape, where you have an optimal range. So the entire precision of the new area of geromedicine is working within the normal values, optimizing individuals towards the lowest risk of either death or the lowest risk of another disease or the first disease, or functioning better, because very often it's not only important to avoid the disease, but also feeling better, having the energy, having the power. That's what people want and we are thriving for. You are feeling better and you are better, and your risk is the lowest for detrimental effects on your body. And very often that's called a disease.
Mhm. Yeah, I was thinking, without getting into, a disease or the kind of pathology um, here space, nootropics, for example, right? I mean, I personally have tried dozens of them. Most of them don't really do anything. Even compared with caffeine, for example. Definitely none of them does anything compared with a good night's sleep. I think, maybe common wisdom is that, they're good if you somehow are in a very stressful situation where, your cognitive capacity may be impaired. But if your brain is already working properly, most of them are just not going to do anything or improve, your capacity beyond that.
Yeah, but this is a good example. So, and that brings me back to the core principles. First, you need an indication before doing an intervention. And I will give you another example. I'm a physician. I'm an internal medicine specialist. I know something about how our pancreas works, the heart works, the brain works, because internal medicine is really focusing on the entire body. I also worked in oncology. Nobody would actually accept a patient coming to my room and saying, doctor, I want chemotherapy. The first thing is, yeah, you say, of course, but this is not how it works in healthy longevity medicine at the moment, at least, because you would only prescribe chemotherapy if that person has cancer. Yes, so you are diagnosing first. What we have to learn in precision geromedicine is diagnosing first what somebody needs based on what's happening in their life, if they had a good night's sleep or not, if they have stressed or not, and especially going deeper, really understanding the biology. How are your mitochondria functioning? How is your DNA repair? What about your proteins you are building? Are they good building blocks? How is your microbiome functioning? Do you have the right species on board? And if not, do you have the right fibers on board? So do you have the right bricks? And that leads, while analyzing the data, we call that diagnostic gerodiagnostics, then you can say, maybe we can substitute, we could do an intervention with certain agents. And that can be supplements, it can be lifestyle interventions. And this can be repurposed drugs and whatever intervention you would like to do. And most importantly is then coming back to the example in the outpatient clinic. I'm seeing a patient who wants chemotherapy. I'm diagnosing cancer. I'm giving chemotherapy. Nobody would not measuring again, which means you are measuring again if the cancer is gone. So you have a follow-up. That's important. So you first do an SCT scan, you're giving chemotherapy, and you're doing it again. And that's most important. We have to evaluate if our interventions works. Very often, either in the biohacking space or in the wellness space or in the healthy longevity medicine space, because the borders are not clear, we don't measure again. And it's not about just feeling well, but are you well? Are you better? Can we quantify the changes? And I don't say that not feeling could be underrated, absolutely. But it should be rated based on scoring systems like quality of life scoring systems to really say, okay, is this meaningful and how likely is it that it's placebo effect? And how likely is it that actually the molecule or the interventions you did really had the outcome you wanted to have?
Mm-hmm. And I would imagine that, some things are easier to measure, right? Athletic performance, you mentioned VO2 max, for example, which, of course is, I guess, one of the most important, I guess, metrics that we have, to keep track of how we age. Grip strength, I've always heard, was also, one of the important ones. Other things are harder or impossible to measure, I guess. Like, we don't have anything that can really effectively measure how many years we have left, for example, right? I mean, I guess there's a little bit of, aging clocks, right? It's not 100% clear to me that aging clocks are really as validated as they could be, for example. I don't know, I wonder what you think.
So clocks are nothing else than using data, which could be and are available to predict either how old you are chronologically, or how long you're going to live, or what your risk is of a disease. So these are the three major outcomes. Do I have to measure certain things to predict how old I am chronologically? I don't think so. We did that 10 years, 15 years ago. So because we wanted to know, are there markers being associated with chronological age? Can we predict how old we are in our passport? So let's don't do that. We move forward. So, but then the question is, can we predict how long I'm going to live or you are going to live? So can we predict mortality? And yes, we can, but of course, there is not 100% certainty. Nothing is 100% certain in life. But these kind of clocks, and you can either use blood clocks or you can have an epigenetic clock, they are quite accurate on population level, how long that population is going to last, so to live. The difficulty at the moment is, how good are they compared to other predictors? And secondly, is, can I apply something which is useful on population level to an individual level? And here it comes in me as a researcher looking at populations, and we say, great, it really works. And then I'm seeing you in my clinic, and then I am confronted with lots of uncertainty, because you might be the outlier where it does not work so well. And that's the reason why we need multiple markers. And this is what we are doing in clinical practice. It's not just one clock, which will actually showcase you how old you are and giving your biological age, and there is the chance of dying, of having an age-related disease. We now learn that aging is so heterogeneous that your brain might have a different speed. Your risk for Alzheimer's is different compared to the risk of heart failure, the risk of sarcopenia. So now we know that we have to apply so many different clocks with all their certain uncertainty, learning how to apply them to give more certainty to that individual. That's key, and that's what we are applying in clinical practice. Yeah. And that's a good part of precision neuromedicine.
Definitely. I think one of the kind of overarching mental models that I think is very relevant here is, most people are just really bad thinking in terms of statistics, right? I think, as a doctor, as a scientist, you think in terms of, well, this intervention is useful for, 90% of the people, which means it's not useful for 10% of the people, right? It's a natural way of thinking. Whereas for most people, it's a strange way to think about it, right? If you take a medicine, you expect the medicine to work. You don't think, well, there's a 70 or an 80 or a 90% chance that this medicine may work or not, right? It's a little bit of an unnatural way. And the same way, right? Like, everybody knows, somebody that comes to 90 or 100 years of age and smokes. And you think, well, should they have got lung cancer? Well, it's a statistical process, right? Like, it's not 100% certain that, by smoking, you're going to get lung cancer, right? It's just, normally it happens, but it doesn't have to happen always, right?
Yeah, but if I have an intervention being clinically relevant in 90% of the population, I would take it. Okay, so that's a very successful one. Very importantly, often we are talking about responders and non-responders, and then the response rate is 60, 70%, or even less. But that also highlights that the uniqueness of your body, the beauty of the body, is so different compared to other peers, that maybe the intervention is not for you. And again, there we can learn so much from the cancer space, where response rates are sometimes only 25 or 30% or very, very, very limited. And why is that? Because we haven't understood the uniqueness of that tumor, for example. So in analogy for the aging process, we have to understand the uniqueness of aging, because you are definitely aging differently compared to me and compared to other peers, and even the uniqueness of the aging process within my body and different organ systems. is so fantastic that we need very likely not one magic pill, but we will have a huge amount of interventions based on the uniqueness where we want to interfere.
Mhm. Definitely. Yeah, I think this is also one of the things that a lot of people confuse about longevity. There's, I don't know, the epigenetic programming, folks, for example, think, well, if you can solve this, you could solve everything. Well, maybe not everything, probably a lot of things, but like, I don't think there's going to be a single one treatment that you could apply and then suddenly, it cures all age related diseases.
Yeah, there's a hierarchy, of course. So if you are starting very deep in the biology, you are starting with the genetics and then the epigenetics. And then at the surface, somewhere on cellular level, if you have a senescent cell, that's the outcome. So an old cell which is not replicating anymore, that's the outcome of processes downstream within the cell. So we understand that there is a logic within a cell and um, how cells are aging. However, what to treat when, we still have to discover, and especially not only in fundamental research, but also then apply that into trials. And that's what we are doing at the NUS Academy for Healthy Longevity, where we really try to phenotype individuals well. We cluster them into gerotypes. So how do you age? Can we cluster individuals into different groups of the aging process? And then giving them individualized, based on that group, interventions. And these are the first studies we are doing based on that concept that it's not one aging process. And there are multiple aging processes we are talking about.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to read about that when the study come out.
That's
Oh,
Prometheus. That's our X Prize study. So really giving individualized care as we already do in clinical practice, but now really um, bringing the evidence into academia to see, okay, what works, and learning from it, measuring not only at the end of the intervention, but measuring individuals consecutively. What is the response to a certain intervention? Should we do a dose adjustment? And having criteria when we do those adjustments, and not just based on, I think it works. I'm feeling better. My sleep yesterday was better, not today, but maybe let's keep it, or let's dose adjust, and having criteria which are measurable, which are objective. And that's what we love here at the Academy.
yes. Let me ask you also about other, I wouldn't say more sophisticated, maybe sexy interventions. Rapamycin, senolytics. Do those have a place, or like, is there enough evidence, for example, where you would sometimes tell somebody, you know what, maybe rapamycin makes sense for you because you're doing this and this and this, right? So you should try it out and see if it works. Or taking a combination of senolytics, for example, to see what comes out, or there's just not enough evidence in humans, for example.
So let's talk about rapamycin first. So does it make sense to interplay with mTOR and inhibiting it? Yes, conceptually it makes sense. If you're looking at the animal studies, yes, in some animals it makes sense. We do a study giving 6 milligram of rapamycin at the NUS Academy. And we decided to do that because we thought that, or we concluded that there is not too much evidence with regards to giving rapamycin in humans. So we wrote a systematic review. It was published in Lancet Healthy Longevity, like now 1.5 years ago. And what we were able to showcase that we only have less than 20 studies in quite diverse populations, being very often quite older, and not comparable to, for example, biohackers. Very often, users are much younger compared to the ones included in studies. What we also found is that many organ systems were even not measured. So the effect of rapamycin um, for example, on skin and other organs is just absent. So that's a reason why we are doing another study with 6 milligram of rapamycin once a week to showcase hopefully the effect.
How about senolytics?
So there is not much evidence with regard to senolytics in humans who are healthy yet. So senolytics are based on the entire idea that we are accumulating senescent cells which are not able to divide anymore. And while not being able to divide anymore, they are also metabolically different compared to younger cells in their function. And we now know that senescent cells at older age might influence the environment where they are living in, and where they are in the tissues might influence the environment negatively. And that also might lead to cancer and other age-related diseases. So we were able to showcase in reviews that many organs of aging individuals are accumulating these kind of senescent cells. It might also be possible not only accumulating it, but also that we might reverse senescence and have a little bit lower cells. But here comes the idea. If we think that there are too many of these senescent cells in older individuals, can we just remove them? It's a little bit like chemotherapy. You have cancer, you're removing these kind of cells. So it's absolutely logic. The animal models are working quite well, that animals are less frail and they're living a little bit longer. However, there's not a conclusion in human studies that this might help in relatively healthy individuals. There are a couple of studies. The first one was in also in osteoarthritis, with the idea, okay, could it help with the osteoarthritis? That study was negative. Think more to come. There's only one study showcasing that if you are giving a cocktail of senolytics, that you also have either in fat or in skin, you have lesser amount of senescent cells being measured. So it seems also to work in humans, but we really need to showcase that there is an effect on well-being, clinically relevant outcome parameters.
Um, Switching topics a little bit. I would like to ask you the same question that I asked actually Matt Caverlane a couple of months ago, or a few months ago when I spoke with him. If somebody was implementing a variety of these interventions, being properly measured, taking the right actions, having the right lifestyle, you know, doing interventions when it makes sense with current technology, how long could they expect to live? Right? If somebody was doing everything right, and kind of, taking care of themselves, the right way, but without necessarily trying experimental new molecules, right? As the state of the precision, gerontology today, right? Like, what would be the maximum lifespan of a person?
Okay. It depends on what your baseline is. So how well you have chosen your parents, um, where you grew up. So the question is, are we talking about somebody who is just born, where we can already influence the first decades of life, or not? I think this is all hypothetical, because then we have to wait for more than 100 years until we have that result. But what we already know from population studies, that if somebody is just normal, so you're a normal person, you have a normal diet, you're just normal, you are average, you're average in class, then while optimizing the diet, optimizing the physical activity, optimizing the sleep based on the data we have, you could absolutely add a decade of your life, at least 10 years on population level. Absolutely possible. If we want to change the health of nations, I think we know what we do. The question is, how do we implement that? Because it's not that there is a lack of knowledge, but there is a lack of implementation science knowledge. why do we still have processed food? Why do we have, you refer to the Coca-Cola, why do we still sell it? So adding to populations 10 years is absolutely feasible. If you're looking at individuals, it's of course a question which I cannot prove. However, I have an idea. Adding 10, 20 years to individuals' lives, if they're starting at the age of 40 to 50, I would say as a person, is absolutely feasible, because if we know what the risks are of that person and we can intervene much, much earlier, then it makes sense that we could prolong that healthy lifespan by X amount. And 10 years is absolutely, in my view, feasible.
Awesome. And what
did Matt say? What did Nat Capeline say?
So he gave a little less advanced question, but he said 120 is probably achievable with what we know today for a lot of people. Then I think you were a little bit under it, like if 85, for example, is the maximum average lifespan in Singapore, I guess adding an extra 20 years would give you to 105. Maybe for some individuals 110, I guess. Yeah, but now here's the other part of the question, right? Which is, I think, what is most interesting for me, right, as somebody that is within the biotech field, right? Like, what kinds of technologies would enable us to go beyond that? What kind of interventions? So we talk, for example, about epigenetic programming, right? Like, what other kinds of things would have that potential to give us 5 years, 10 years, 20 years of extra lifespan?
So two things, and I will go back to gerodiagnostics and to the gero interventions. I think whatever we do, we need a better dashboard than we have now about our body. And think about your electric car. So you know when to charge, you know how much to charge, you know how your battery life is being changed if you are charging too much. And it's not only the battery, but this is very often being discussed in the world of electric cars, but it's also with regards to the engine, your tires, or whatever you name it in your electric car, and everything is being measured. And if you're looking at your body, now you can maybe measure if you want, your temperature, your heart rate variability, your sleep, and that's actually it. So we need to invest in technology to get a better understanding where is what's happening and where interventions are needed, when and what dosage, because that will help us. Because we can say, yes, everybody needs gene editing, everybody needs epigenetic editing. That's a technology. But for me, most important, the technology will come. When do we apply it to whom? Okay, with what kind of result? That's most important. So how do we get grip on the aging process and have a dashboard, as I have in my electric cars, is giving me the hints what to do when, with the outcome I can choose either to have to recharge my battery much, much more and ruining my battery time in my engine, or saying, okay, I love my car and I do the good things, I'm optimizing it. And we have to make sure that based on the input of data, everybody is equipped with knowledge to then make the decision what the outcome should look like. And that's most important. I think with all the drug screenings being done at the moment with regards to aging processes, there will be more drugs. Like even GLP-1 receptor agonists are now the longevity drug. The SGLT2 inhibitors. So there will be an entire arena of repurposing the drugs and actually seeing how they are acting. And there will be many more drugs. But this is when events already occurred very often. So we have to make sure that our genome is, I wouldn't say perfectly designed, but we are overcoming DNA breaks, for example. We can measure them adequately, because then we could solve something like cancer. Epigenetic alterations and epigenetic reprogramming seems to be nice, but it has also potential side effects because epigenetic has a root cause, has a goal. So with all the technologies being coming, think about also the entire field of stem cells. Not only that we are giving stem cells, mesenchymal stem cells, for example, but how can we make sure that the cells we have are staying healthy in the environment? And how do we make sure that we are analyzing well what cellular systems doing in certain environments? And here the microbiome is a nice example again. Like microbes without the fibers, without bricks, will not work. Senolytics might not work without, or stem cell transfusions will not work if you don't first change the environment that actually stem cells want to be there and host themselves there. So combinations, I think, from therapies like a senolytic together with then afterwards stem cell interventions might be the game, but it starts always understanding what the biology is.
That makes a lot of sense. And maybe one last question regarding that. So I think conventionally it's understandable that it's very hard, it's very expensive to measure all those things, right? All these different tests and so on and so forth. Not everybody, I guess, can afford a concierge doctor or a longevity clinic, right? But what kinds of things could people do by themselves versus would need a physician? And the reason that I'm asking that is, precisely now, everybody has a ChatGPT or a Claude, in their pocket, right? So at least in some countries, somebody can go and do blood tests on their own and so on and so forth. What would you say is the possibility for people to take some of this, some of the things in their own hands versus, requiring an expert, a physician, a clinic in order to optimize that health?
It's a difficult question because we don't have the answer what individuals themselves can do. We only see that there is lots of self-medication already. There's lots of like biohackers, for example, with rapamycin. There is a huge population who is taking supplements, and it's also a sort of a self-experimenting with them. I think what we have to do is two things. First, we have to give knowledge to individuals why and how to do what, and actually say, okay, this is for consumers, and this is for GPs, and this is for specialists. And secondly, in my view, we have to change the thought that you can invest in interventions, but you cannot invest in diagnostics. Hence, you would not go to a physician. I think the best investment is not buying over the counter all the supplements, but invest in yourself, getting genetic analysis done, get your microbiome measured with a physician or with somebody who has potentially more knowledge and is trained compared to you. I think that's most important. We always think, yes, it's not affordable. That's true for the most countries. But here in Singapore, we opened the worldwide first longevity clinic in a publicly funded hospital. There's only a minimal amount individuals have to pay for themselves. It's now happening in all the other countries that we are opening these kind of clinics in publicly funded structures. And that's what we have to achieve. I think the entire notion of we can do it ourselves, it's all good, but then we also have to transfer the knowledge. We have to implement it into structures which are replicable in different countries to give consumers, clients, in the end, these are our patients, the choice to invest in themselves. And the first thing is knowing who you are and having the basics right. And I would love to see that conversation, how much people should pay out of pocket for it. Why wouldn't you want to know? Or you are not buying an electric car without that dashboard, okay? Because you are paying for it. And at the moment, it's in most of the countries, for most of the people, unaffordable. And that's what we have to change. We have to democratize it. We have to make it better. We have to make it accessible. The good thing is that in most of the countries, people understand what healthy longevity medicine would actually do. It would change, and they're interested to come. We did a survey in Singapore showcasing that 90% of the population knows what lifespan is. Roughly 45% of the population knows what health span is, so they understand healthy versus unhealthy living. And most importantly, nearly 2/3 of the population has interest to come to a longevity clinic. So they want to invest in themselves, either with time or even with money, to be healthier for longer because they see it as an investment. And that change is so important. So in my view, we have to drive to medicalize it at the moment because it's hardcore science. It's difficult in clinical practice. It's difficult to understand. How difficult can it be for even ChatGPT? Yeah. But how difficult is it for somebody to actually make the decision what to do and not? But the curiosity should be there, and everybody know who you are, see if you can and can measure your VO2 max, have a digital device, be curious about your body, and there it starts.
I think, yeah, I mean, some of those points are really good, right? Like, you mentioned the GLP-1s, of course, eating less is cheaper than eating more, right? All other things being equal, right? The intervention is actually cheaper than the base case, right? But I think, unfortunately, in a lot of Western countries where there's already many issues with access to medical care, right? Like if we ask the physicians to check out people's wearables and check their sleep logs and their nutrition and their entire list of supplements, right? Every doctor in the country would be 3 times as busy as they are right now, right? So I mean, I wish that was an option, right? But in my opinion, right, like we're going to need technology to supplement some of these things because as humans, right? Or like, human doctors, there's just not enough of them.
No, absolutely. But you are right. So, eh, but there it starts that we have to make all the digital devices we have more understandable. What do we do with it? Most of the times you are looking at it for 2 weeks and then you just have it because everybody has it. But the actions are most important. And there we need to have the knowledge transfer to the community because this is public health. It's not polishing. It's public health. Know what your estimated VO2 max is. Know what your temperature is. Know what your sleep is, and act on that. So absolutely, individuals should have more knowledge, and we should be more intelligent that we are now to nudge individuals into certain lifestyle habits. And it's absolutely unfeasible to have 100% of the population, because 100% is aging, and the current healthcare system to be tackled. But then we have to ask ourselves, okay, who do we actually see? Who has the human touch? Who has the AI touch? Who has what to deliver what outcome? And even we haven't decided what the outcome is. Is it lifespan extension, or is it health span extension? And for me, it's health span, and it's about that people can enjoy their lives being productive, which is very important for societies. That's most important. So we need that discussion about on what kind of level, societal level versus individual level, what we want to achieve with what, and what is the return of investment we want to achieve. So what's actually the business case to implement these kind of new healthcare system structures?
And I think that would be interesting enough to have its own podcast because that is a that is a complicated topic. I would imagine more complicated in the US than in Singapore, which again is a very smart and well run country where a lot of these things I think have been figured out. Not so much here. But we're already at the hour mark, which I think is the limit of attention of people listening to podcasts. But this was super interesting. Maybe one last brief question, right? Like if somebody wanted to learn more about how to either take care of their health or learn more about the research that you're doing at the National University of Singapore or or other work, what would be a good starting point?
Yes, look at our website, longevityacademy.sg. There you can see all the studies we are running and all the links to other consortia we are driving. Follow me on LinkedIn. You will find me easily, Andrea B. Maier. Look at Chi Longevity, the website, chilongevity.com. And I think if people have a device, just look at device, how well you slept today in action. It's another podcast, how you actually interpret these kind of data.
Oh, for sure. Like we could spend another hour, talking about just that. But this was super interesting. Thank you so much, Andrea, again for all your insights. And thanks again for taking the time to speak with me today and participate in the podcast.
Perfect. Thank you so much.